Hey guys, Cam here from today's iPhone.com, and this is a tips and tricks episode where we talk to you about everything that perhaps you didn't know you could do with the camera app. So I'm going to go through a few things. It's not going to be all basic stuff. It may be something you already knew about, and forgive me if that's the case, but I'm sure some of these things maybe you didn't know. I'm going to talk to you about these grid lines. Now you'll see on my camera app I have grid lines. I always have them there. When I go out to take photographs, I generally try to stick by the rule of thirds. And that, if you don't know, is for whatever reason, for the way our minds and our eyes work, for whatever reason, stuff that's on the third lines tends to make a picture look better. For instance, if you look through my camera app now, if I put the bottom of the books just at the top of the third line, the picture looks like it's better split up, whereas if I kind of leave it at the top, it looks awful if I leave it halfway down. Equally, it doesn't look so great, but if I pop it on one of the third lines, it looks good. And that's just the way it works. You generally put the object that you want to focus on one of those third lines. And it's not just about putting the object on a third line, it's also about splitting the image up into, I guess, different sections. But to actually activate those, unlike iOS 6, you can't just access an option on the camera app itself. You have to go back into your settings. If you scroll down until you see your camera options, here you go, photos and camera, and you can go scroll down and then you'll see camera grid, and you can switch the grid off. And if I go back into my camera app, you'll see I no longer have that grid. And if I want to switch it on, I just switch it back on again, go back to my camera app, and those lines, the third lines, are back. Now, something that also made its way into the iOS camera a couple of years ago, maybe it was iOS 6, I can't quite remember exactly when it made its appearance. But Apple started letting us use our shutter button, volume buttons as a shutter button. So if I turn my camera around and I want to take a quick picture, then I can press either of the two volume buttons on my iPhone and it will take a picture. But what this also means that if I grab my headphones, I can also do the same by pressing a button on my headphones. So your headphone remote control, this one here, then basically becomes like a remote control for your camera. See, I just pressed my volume button and it took a picture. And I'm going to take another picture. Watch my right hand here. You'll see I'll gently press one of the volume buttons and I've just taken a picture. So that's really, really handy. If you've got your camera set up somewhere and you don't want it to move and you want to kind of move away from it perhaps, you can then press the volume button like so, and I've taken another picture. It's really, really cool. Now, what you may know as well is now we have a burst mode in iOS, and that's something that made itself a feature in iOS 7. So I press and hold the camera button, and you can see and you can hear it's just taken 31 images. Now, what you can do with these now with iOS 7.1 is if you slide back into your photos and camera settings, you can then choose to upload your burst photos to PhotoStream, and you switch that on, and then when it's connected to your computer, all your burst photos will be available for importing. So it doesn't just choose the 2 or 3 that you've selected, it will upload the entire lot so you can choose through them at your convenience from your desktop. Thing you might notice with iOS's camera is that when you tap to focus something, what it does then, because it doesn't have a separate auto exposure and a separate autofocus, it will focus and set its exposure based on that one point that you focused on. And that's not something that you can easily change unless you use a third-party app. But let's say, for instance, you want to lock that focus point while you're moving the camera around before you take your picture. You can do that. Now, what you need to do is you tap on the object or the person that you want to focus on, and then you hold your finger on the screen for a few seconds. And you'll see that once it's finished pulsating like so, I can then let go. You'll see I've got AEAF lock on the top. So now my focus point is set, and it doesn't matter if I then press my shutter button or if I press the camera button, it won't try and change the focus. It just takes the picture as it is. So if I do that again, notice I've now focused on one point and I take a picture and it's done exactly as I want to. You can also switch that off just by tapping on the screen, and it's gone. And you can do that every single time that you take a photograph. One last feature that you may be aware of, and it's something that's been around for a little while now, is HDR. Now with iOS 7.1, HDR became automatic with the iPhone 5S, but you can change that. You can switch it on or off. Now what HDR does is, if you have an image that's got very stark contrast between the bright and the dark patches, it kind of evens the image out a little bit. So let's just, for the sake of this video, I'm going to move my bright light here, and you can see in my image I have a bright light, and the rest of the image isn't great. So if I tap on my light there, everything else becomes dark. If I tap on the back, everything kind of becomes light. If I have HDR on, then you'll notice that the final image is actually a lot more balanced than what you may have seen on the camera. So that's non-HDR, that one, and this is with HDR. So you can see it's kind of balanced it out a lot. There's changed some of the contrast, it's evened it out, it's made the colors better. And that is a really great tool to have within a smartphone camera, because a lot of the time your lighting conditions aren't going to be good. So those are my camera tips. If you have any questions about iOS 7.1 or just iOS in general, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, or get me on Twitter. I'm at TiP_cam. I'll see you again soon.